I'm sure that you are also, as we in Serbia, that you are following very closely what is going on in Brussels those days with the election of the new people who are going to lead the main institutions in Brussels after the European Parliament elections. And it's not going well. Let's be diplomatic in this respect. Obviously, heavy talks between the main people of the different political groupings. But one thing what struck me yesterday was the speech by Mr. Macron. So actually, French president not satisfied with the results of the talks, especially with the young lions, let's call them like that, coming from the new member states. He said that the EU, it's obvious, cannot enlarge itself while 28 of them cannot reach the agreement. So the worst message was not sent to already member states of the European Union, but to those who are aspiring and seeing European Union as something, as a strategic goal and a strategic interest. So I may stop even discussing further the narrative of Serbia and saying that we are reactive to this type of narrative coming from Europe, but I am going to use the opportunity to share some of the both history but also present time developments in Serbia regarding the European integration of my country. I will start with. Okay. Yeah, that's it. Just not to, yeah. Just to position ourselves, we are Western Balkan country. We do not like the term. We would love to escape from term Western Balkans. We would like to be known as Southeastern Europe, but this is taken already. It's not us. Obviously, the term has been coined just because we are different, and we are different because the Western Balkan countries are, the equation is over there, form a big socialistic Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, but minus Slovenia, because Slovenia is a Central Eastern European country, and plus Albania, of course, not being part of the former Yugoslavia. Why we are so different? Because of the 90s. During the 90s, the situation between the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia and all others that have been created after the dissolution of the big Yugoslavia deteriorated in that manner that we actually were not being able to establish a good relationship with the European Union and to seek the European future only after the beginning of this century. So that means that we lost the whole of the 90s, going deeper into the internal, regional, sub-regional problems, and not being able to catch up in terms of the developments with the Central Eastern European countries, which at that moment actually created a very good relationship, start the negotiations, and at some point finalize the negotiations in order to become in 2004, 2007, and including Croatia, 2013, a new member state of the European Union. During that time, we were known for the sanctions, civil war, NATO intervention, or aggression or bombing. We are still not very clear what happened in 1999. Different type of sanctions introduced, so-called smart sanctions, which are used right now with the Russian Federation, but even stronger at the moment of the 90s. And the only positive development was for Serbia once when we overthrown Milosevic, which was October 2000, and then the positive development, we thought, and speeding up the process of European integration of Serbia, at that moment, Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. I did not move from my town, which is not Belgrade, but Zemun, a small town on the other side of Sava and Danube River from Belgrade. But actually I changed the four passports up to now. So I was born in big Yugoslavia, then I was a citizen of Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, then of State Union Serbia, Montenegro, and now I'm a citizen of the Republic of Serbia. Let's hope it's going to stay like this in terms of my passports, at least. So that is also one of the important things. So beginning of 21st century, the re-establishment of the relationship. Again, a bumpy road. It was not so easy. As Johanna said, I was invited back in 2005 to help to people in the government to negotiate the first agreement with the European Union Association Agreement or Stabilization and Association Agreement. And we started 2005, but we finished it only 2008. Why? Because we were unable to finalize it swiftly? No, because of the full cooperation with the ICTY, with the 47 of indictees that were in the hands of Serbia and that were voluntarily surrendered there, but 2 we could not find, and that was the reason why we were called off with the negotiation. At the same time, the dissolution of Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, and only then, since 2006, we started our own roads, and now we can only be blamed for the development of the integration process of Serbia and the European Union. So I presented to you the data, which are important as an information tool. In our case, that is extremely important to understand why the process is getting so long. As I told you, we started to re-establish the connection with the European Union October 2000, or at the very end of year 2000, and we are now, what, July 2019, and as Joachim defined us, we are the newest candidate country negotiating membership, which is true. Actually, after 19 years, we are still negotiating. A few days ago, I returned from Brussels when we open our 17 out of 35 chapters. With this tempo, we will negotiate for a very, still very long period of time. But I'm not going to bother you with the history, but go into the important elements. So for us, a very important element is, of course, the status of candidate and the opening of the negotiations. But even that was not without the political influx. Our political influx, or the elephant in the room for Serbia, whatever you would like to call it, is the status of Kosovo. For Serbia, Kosovo and Metohija, according to our constitution, and normalization process with Pristina that has started back in 2011-12, but got the speed in 2013 with the Brussels Agreement, and that gave us the opportunity to actually open the negotiations with the EU. So what is going on in terms of the normalization or the relationship with Pristina? It has its own tempo. Now it does not have a tempo. I don't know if you follow that, but the dialogue has been suspended or has been stalled or stopped because of the introduction of the measures by Pristina, introduction of the custom duties to the goods coming from both Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Why those two? Because they do not recognize the independence from the Western Balkan countries. It's also a political message. And of course, in the situation when there is 100% custom duties to the goods coming from Serbia or from Bosnia and Herzegovina, you cannot actually discuss the issue of the normalization of the process. For us, this is extremely problematic for the negotiation process. We could not progress if there is no development in the normalization between Belgrade and Pristina. So, political issue is heavily involved into the technical negotiations of the introduction of standards. Why this is so important, why I'm so emphasizing that. Up to now, it never happened that the third party is conditioning the negotiation between EU and the candidate country. This is the first time. The third country being the third party being Pristina, definitely. We are not, during our negotiation with the EU, we are not discussing the normalization or the relationship with Pristina. We cannot, because there are 5 member states of the EU not recognizing the proclaimed independence of Kosovo. There are 22 of them, 23 actually of them recognizing, and that is always a problematic as a narrative, is a different one. So the messages coming from a member states are the different one. This is the most problematic political issue that we are facing right now in terms of the integration process. How we are going to solve that one? $1 million question. Nobody can give you an answer, particularly now. The first step is, of course, to resume the talks, to sit and to discuss, which is obviously now the toughest issue to reach. So as I told you, we start negotiating. Okay, September 2013, or the first IGC was January 2014, and last week we had the 10th IGC, the Intergovernmental Conference, the conference between the representatives of the member states, European Commission, as well as Serbia. And we opened, that means that we were ready to open and start with the process of analyzing how good we are 17 out of 35 chapters. 35 chapters are the chapters where the acquis, the European law, has been divided and concentrate in different areas, like free movement of goods is obviously the first negotiating chapter, because EU is based on the free movement of goods. So the whole acquis, the whole legal system of the European Union, primary and secondary law, but also international obligation arising from other international documents, are in those areas. And that means that we, Serbia, the candidate country, has to harmonize with the existing law, but not only existing one, the one that is also going to be created until the moment that we become member state, which is, as you can imagine, not an easy task. It's not only to copy-paste and to adopt the law, which is in harmony with the European standards, but you have to implement that. You have to produce a track record out of this. And it's much more difficult to do that, not in the technical areas. Like if we, Serbia, would like to sell mineral water, gas water to the EU market, it's not only the quality of water, but it's also packaging. That means that the quality of this bottle, which is made of glass, has to be in accordance with the European standards. So it's costly, it's time-consuming, and it requires a lot of work to deal with the issue, which is, of course, a technical story. The political one is the one that is which creates a lot of problems. So, what are the main conclusions that somebody following very closely the process can observe or can have as both being a citizen of Serbia, but also somebody who is following the process? First, foremost, and the most important conclusion or effect is that the process is very long one. Not only in terms of the steps that to be taken, but it bored the public opinion. We don't have a proper narrative to keep them interested. Or if you do not mind, we can never be sexy topic. So EU integration of Serbia, or talking to the citizens how important it is that the bottle made of glass should be of that standard. I'm sure that nobody would love to listen that story, televised or discussed in the political talk shows. That's why we are trying to do something else. We are using what is the expression in martial arts. We are using the strength of the enemy. That means that we are putting the emphasis on the issue of the rule of law. We had to change the narrative in Serbia, but not only in Serbia, also in the Western Balkans. So we are now speaking too much about the speed to become member of the European Union, or the date when we are going to be able to become member of the EU, but we put the emphasis on the very process. We put the emphasis on things that the process is bringing to Serbia and to us citizens. And our test ground is, strange enough, but really rule of law. So if you are observing the narrative in Serbia nowadays, it's not Kosovo that both position, opposition, and civil society is fighting around. It's actually the rule of law, which is a positive development. Of course, with the different ideas and the different attitudes. But it is important for people to listen the story, how important and how to fight, how is neglected the fight against corruption, for example, which is cornerstone of the rule of law. And according to the public opinion in Serbia, 52 to 54% are pro-EU membership of Serbia. But 73% are for the reforms of that type, regardless of the membership of the European Union, which is actually the best possible situation that we have now in order to advance. What we are facing, alongside with a very long process, the narrative coming from the European Union. And I picked one. The very beginning of the last commission, so-called Juncker's commission, was during my time there will be no enlargement. Of course that he was right, but that was rude. Because we had to fight during his term to explain that yes, Mr. Juncker was right, but it doesn't mean do not do anything. Quite contrary. It's in our hands, in our job to do. But the message was sent both to the member states and also to the European administration or the Brussels bureaucracy, as we all know them. Whenever your boss is saying you don't have to hurry, you will slow it down twice as slow as it possible. And that is what we are facing too. EU is a moving target. We knew that. That means that we are never going to enter the European Union as it is right now, but as it's going to be in future. That means more acquis, more new policies, more developments of the new policies. Look, the European Parliament elections show that there are changes in terms of the new players, like the Greens, like ALDE, so the Liberals. That means that the new policies or some policies are going to flourish, like the environmental policy for sure is going to be, or the climate changes is going to be among the biggest to develop in the future. That means more money that we have to give in order to catch up in that respect. We are also coming at a time when EU, of course, never made a mistake, but learned from bad experiences, put the emphasis on some new things. Rule of law, chapters, for us, those are chapters 23 and 24. That means the reform of judiciary, freedom of media, then the migration policy, visa, asylum issues, obviously issues which are the very important and the stumbling block with the new member states, at least some of them. Because of that, or because they were not able, European Commission was not able to push them to continue with its obligation once when they became member states. They are now pressing to introduce all of those things prior to the membership, which is not easy. That means we have to, in the very short period of time, to build the institutions, judiciary, democratic institution in general, in order to produce the track record of their work. That is going to be extremely difficult. I'm not saying not possible, but extremely difficult, and that is something that needs the both endeavor by European Union and also us. Of course, poor newcomers are not possible any longer. That's why we have to be in something which is known as the European Semester Light, so more or less something that exists for the Euro member states, those that are coming from the Eurozone. We have to prove that we are economically and fiscally stable, which is again a new development. And our reactive narrative is coming from the very fact that the environment for us is not very positive one. Actually, the enlargement was a bad word during the elections for the European Parliament. Nobody wanted to mention it. And you can hear that some new words are envisaged to replace the enlargement as a very word, like open door policy. For the first time, I thought that that belongs to NATO. But obviously, for the first time, they start discussing about the open door policy. And even that was too much for some of the member states, so they accepted the perspective, European perspective. Or they go so deep into that discussion and dismantling the enlargement as a good perspective for the Western Balkan countries, putting the emphasis on the connectivity, which is important thing. How to connect the Western Balkan, even how to build the Western Balkan Union or the regional economic area. But is that instead of membership? EU is saying, no, this is a playground. Use that as a good instrument for becoming more integrated, for becoming a member, tomorrow member of the European Union. But with the developments that we are listening, with the narratives that we are listening right now, it's not very sure, I'm not very sure, that that is not going to be instead of at least speed or membership that will come very soon. And one thing that is also a newest development, I'm sure that you followed what happened with both Macedonia and now North Macedonia and Greece. So-called Prespa agreement, extremely important agreement for the region, where they reached the understanding about this spending issue. And after that, member states are fighting for a year now, less than a year, to acknowledge that that was a great move for Macedonia, North Macedonia, eventually I will learn, for North Macedonia to progress towards opening of negotiations. So, opening of negotiation, not closing negotiation and becoming member of the European Union. It's a very long road. So that is the issue of the credibility. Credibility of the EU is on the stake, and that is something that is used by those who are very present already in the region. By definition, they are always present, especially Russian Federation, but the newest comer is China, heavily present in Southeastern Europe wider, but also Western Balkan. I don't know, but if you know, they are the biggest investors in our region with the loans. EU is giving us grants, but not for building roads. China is giving us loans for building roads. And we badly need infrastructural projects to flourish and to develop. And let me finish. Is there a possibility to create a positive narrative? As I told you, we devise one, and this is the reform process is much more important than the very end. That the very end will be the EU membership. But we cannot neglect the importance and of this attraction of the European Union and help support assessment toolkit for the reforms coming from the European Union. But there is no question mark. We are Serbia, but also Western Balkan countries. We belong to Europe. We are the enclave in terms of the institutional structure of Europe. We do not belong to the EU institutions, and that is the problem. And that's why we are not around the table, but on the table, as somebody said, which means that we are the topic of the discussion. And it's never good if you are topic and not able to discuss about the issues. And let me finish with an important thing that, again, I will finish as I started with Mr. Macron, with President Macron. Obviously, somebody that I love to quote. I disagree with the idea to discuss about the EU reforms, which are needed, desperately needed for the European Union's sake, but also for the Europe sake, and neglecting the connection between the reform or deepening of the integration and the enlargement of the integration, or how many new member states we are able to get. Because we can give some answers to the issues like energy policy, like transport policy, like even common foreign and security policy, migration policy cannot be discussed, and not having us around the table for this discussion. So the positive narrative is possible. It's very difficult, but it's logical, and if I dare to say, it's the only valid one. I will stop here. I hope I did not go over 30 minutes, okay, which is good, and I'm looking forward to listen to Timothy. Thank you.